Let me turn off my audio. There we go. Okay. I have a thing we can all listen to. It's only 60 minutes long. It's the thing. It's really interesting, and I listen to it while I work. So I thought you all might want to hear it. Oh no, not the Instagram ad. The thing I don't have, sadly.
Hello friends, welcome back to my video. Today we're going to try something a little different. I'm calling this Spooky Sunday. It's just going to be scary stories from Reddit, more of an ASMR type thing. I'm going to try and not yell. Still working out the kinks on this, so please let me know if you have suggestions for it, but I hope you enjoy this story. It's titled, Something Walks Whistling Past My House Every Night at 3:03 a.m. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane, near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6 and I love it. The houses are small, but well kept, good sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it, and there's only two strange things here: the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom, but Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the U.S. as a kid. My family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes moving faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule. The big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window. Thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often. At least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month, I think she sits out there on our big red couch, just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Da 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 da. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either, but good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things, winning a radio contest, or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard. You know, the authentic kind. The weather's pretty good, and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings, I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew. Even I knew. Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed, even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was. Really exceptionally, hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us, as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public death and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again. No presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they'd play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere, and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom, and he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good, and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad sitting awake on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shush motion, but patted the couch next to him.
Sorry. No, you don't have to join. You don't have to join if your parents will get mad. I'm just playing the spooky stories. If you guys have any stories you want me to play, just say in chat. I might actually change the drawing, but I want to play Minecraft for a little bit. So, I'm gonna continue. I hope you guys like the spooky stories, since it's Halloween time. So, if you want me to turn them off, I can turn them off, and you can hear me talk. But, I'll stop talking now.
Sat and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. Da, 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 da. It came and it went, just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring the macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously, or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good, long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about the locking shutters, since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see, but I imagine it must have been awfully convincing, since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. Do you know who was always out there whistling every night? Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. We don't talk about that, I said. I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner, Holden said. Mr. Tolles, my sister asked. No way, he's really nice. Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer then. Nola tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go in my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us goodnight and locked the blinds and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't. See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key. He continued, ignoring me. So does our dad, said Nola. No, replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds. Yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain. So, I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next.
Looking for someone new to talk
No.
to? Connect with a
The ad
stranger on
ruined
chat
it.
live stream using your voice.
YouTubers gotta make money, so I don't blame them. Sorry that's not really high quality, by the way. I don't know how to get audio.
Because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all these years, because he knew we took it seriously. So, after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and maybe went and borrowed the key to the blinds. Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. You're lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand. Stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the Whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Nola, I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. Don't look, okay? I told her, don't turn around. We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. Holden, I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window. Eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blind shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. Holden? I asked again. He turned towards me, and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lips so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. What happened? My dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night, in that moment. An old, ugly terror stitched on his face. Parents' fear. Just Holden. He mouthed at me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wonder if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. Don't answer it, my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the Whistler. But that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats that they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. Please don't open the door, Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. We won't, my dad promised, still holding his bat. Nothing is coming in here tonight. Thud, thud, thud. This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. Thud, thud, thud. Call the police, my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. Do you think he was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap, tap, tap? Police, something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. Police. Call the police. Tap, tap, tap. Police. My mom pulled us closer. Police. 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 Please stop, I heard her whisper. I don't think calling them will help, my dad said. How will we know when they're the ones at the door? The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook, then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back, loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once. Big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house. Then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. Stop, Holden yelled. The knocking died. I won't tell, Holden said, staring at the door. I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away. We waited for nearly a minute, then we heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap. Coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room, while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back, so loud it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room, and the knocking stopped. Only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. Okay, he told us. It's done. Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house, and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim, but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizzas and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night, or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of the week, but by Thursday, there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths, and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune, a million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe, or share the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower. If she'd looked out the window that night, would I have looked too? To comfort her? To share that burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave, but we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore, and my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. Well, I am terrified. I also can't whistle. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I will do another one this coming Sunday. Again, if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you want an ASMR channel, let me know on that too. Thanks. I do respond to every comment I get, so please leave one. And I'll see you guys Tuesday.
Subscribe or don't, thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna move the drawing now. Cause today is Free Fan Art Day on my Discord. If you have Discord, I really hope you guys could hear that. I really like Brady Shuhai. He has good stuff. He does not have another Spooky Sunday thing, so I guess we can listen to Lavender Town's creepypasta. Lavender Town creepypasta reading. This one.
Hey everybody, it's Lavender Town. I hope you're somewhere cozy and safe because today I'm going to be reading A Mother's Obsession, a creepypasta by Nick Biotic. I hope you enjoy. This story is rather long, but considering it spans nearly 3 decades, that's to be expected. Much of this I don't remember for obvious reasons, but over the years I've spoken with my mother and other family members about everything, and I've written their accounts down as accurately as I could. Apart from that, I've gotten copies of all the police reports and have written this using information gleaned from them. It all started quite literally the day I was born. I was in a nursery of the hospital, and my mom and grandparents were standing at the window. Being that I was born in a large hospital in a major city, there were 7 or 8 other babies there beside me. Next to my family, another woman was standing with a big smile on her face. Not a creepy one, but the smile of someone who was genuinely happy at this particular moment. She was an average-looking woman, around 22, and had stringy, honey blonde hair. My grandma said she looked like she hadn't showered in a couple days. Regardless of her disheveled appearance, my grandmother greeted the woman. The woman replied cheerily, commenting that all the babies were so adorable. My mom asked the woman which baby belonged to her, but the woman gave her an awkward kind of half glance and didn't answer her. My mom just assumed the woman hadn't heard her. They all continued observing me and the other babies, with my family making comments about how big of a baby I was. They eventually realized the woman was humming. The blonde lady eventually became aware of herself that my family was hearing her, and she quickly apologized, explaining that she was just so excited that her baby boy was finally here. Now that they were interacting again, my mom posed the same question she had earlier, asking the woman which child was hers. The woman replied slowly in a sing-songy voice, "My baby boy is right here." She finished the statement off with a burst of energy and pressed her fingers against the glass. "Isn't he beautiful? I just love him so much." My mom and grandparents tried to determine which baby she was pointing at. "The one there with the white blanket?" my grandpa asked her. "No, that baby isn't even half as cute as my baby boy." The woman was still talking in a playful, sing-songy kind of voice, if that makes sense. She didn't seem threatening or creepy. She just seemed like an especially affable new mother. She kept her finger pressed to the window and brought her face up to it so that her nose was just touching the glass. "That's my sweet, beautiful, amazing little baby boy, right there." She still hadn't given any other clues as to which baby she was pointing at, and it wasn't immediately evident because the handful of babies were all mostly grouped together. "Is he right there?" My grandpa took another guess, pressing his own finger to the window. "With a Nike hat?" The woman took a deep breath. She started giddily stamping her feet as if she were overcome with joy. She took her finger from the glass and started clapping her hands together. "He's so perfect, isn't he? Isn't he perfect?" My grandfather looked at my grandma and nodded his head once. She took it to mean that she should go find a hospital employee. After she walked away, my grandpa turned back to the woman, who was still staring at the baby in the Nike hat with a look of pure joy on her face. "The baby in the Nike hat was me." "Ma'am," my grandpa said to her, but she didn't reply. When my grandpa told me the story, this part of which I've also heard from my mom separately, nearly verbatim, he said that they realized she was all effusive over me, a newborn that wasn't hers and didn't have any relation to her. The woman didn't seem delusional or confused, nor did she seem threatening or dangerous. She just seemed like a new mom, albeit an overexcited one. "Ma'am," he said again. This time the woman whipped her head around, and the look of joy on her face was gone. "What?" she said through clenched teeth. "He's mine, and he's beautiful. Don't you think he's beautiful?" My grandpa looked at her and simply said, "I don't think he's yours." The woman started breathing heavily, and my mom has described her as looking angrier than she's ever seen anyone before or since. My grandpa put his arms in front of my mom and guided her backwards and behind him, making sure he was in between her and the woman. Then, as quickly as she flipped from excited to enraged, she calmed down, and a warm smile crawled across her face. She kissed the tips of her fingers and pressed them against the glass once again, and with that, she turned around and walked away. About 30 seconds after the woman left, my grandma came back with a doctor, to whom my mom and grandpa explained what had just happened. The doctor apologized profusely, explaining that, for obvious reasons, they were very strict about who could get into the nursery, and that he had no idea how someone could get in there without authorization. A security guard was placed in the nursery until, and presumably after, I was taken home. Now to where I can recall for myself, however vaguely. My mom and I went to a playground in the springtime when I was 6 years old, and I had walked there since the weather was nice. After I'd played on the playground for a while and tired myself out, we began to head back home. About halfway between the playground and our house, 2 police cars pulled to a screeching halt. 2 cops got out of the first car and one out of the second, all with guns drawn. They yelled at my mom to get on the ground, and because I didn't know what was going on, after she did, I got on my stomach on top of her back, begging them not to hurt her. My mom was placed in handcuffs and put in the back of the second cop car while the police talked to me. I explained that the woman they detained was indeed my mother, and I assured them of that even after they asked me about it 20 times. After more police showed up and talked to me, as well as my mom, we learned that a frantic woman had placed an anonymous call to the police claiming that a woman with the exact description of my mother and her outfit that day had abducted her son, who had the exact description of me and what I was wearing that day. The call had been placed from a payphone outside the convenience store a few blocks away from our house, and the police, after assuming the woman who hung up before identifying herself had done so in the heat of the moment, put out an Amber Alert. When the police had finally determined that I was indeed my mother's son, they apologized and dropped us back off at our house. Around that time, I had noticed my grandparents and mom getting into heated discussions. Not necessarily arguments, but just more vocally distressed. Specifically on the day that the fake kidnapping was reported, I remember hearing, "It was her, you know it was her," and other similar things. I wasn't sure exactly what they were talking about, but they assured me everything was okay. The following year, when I was in 2nd grade, one of the office workers came to my classroom and asked the teacher to excuse me.
Hold up 1 second. Sorry. I thought I heard an alarm. No, like my house alarm go off. That should have just been me. Sorry, we should resume now.
When I left the room, I was escorted with the office worker and 2 other school employees to the office, where I was sat in the conference room. I remember sitting there for half an hour with the woman who'd gotten me from my classroom, but she wouldn't tell me what was going on. The door to the conference room had a glass pane from nearly top to bottom, so while I waited, I watched as 2 police officers came in and talked to the other office employees. Eventually, my mom walked in, and a few minutes after her arrived my grandparents. All 3 of them rushed in and began giving me hugs and asking if I was okay. Then my mom, my grandparents, and the 2 police officers, 2 of the 3 office employees, and the school principal came in and asked me if I had been approached by anyone I didn't know recently, to which I responded that I hadn't. They told me, in no uncertain terms, that if anyone I didn't know ever came up to me, to begin running and screaming for help until I got somewhere safe. Apparently, as I learned years later, a woman had come into the school claiming to be my aunt and demanded that I be released into her care, as there was a family emergency and my mom and grandparents were unable to get me from school. Due to protocol, the office workers simply did not comply with what the woman was demanding. When one of the workers said they would call my home to get permission to release me, a ruse of course, she was only going to and did call the police, the woman responded by saying, "That beautiful boy only has me. He only has me and you're trying to keep me from him. I don't know what that beautiful child ever did to you to deserve such horrible treatment. All he wants is me, and you're keeping him from me. He's such a beautiful, perfect baby boy, and you want to hurt him. Shame on you." And hurried out of the school with tears running down her face. After the incident at the school, I wasn't allowed to walk home alone, and I was asked regularly if I was approached by any strangers, to which I could honestly say I hadn't been. About a year after that, we began getting phone calls. They were your typical creepy calls, just someone breathing on the other end of the line and then hanging up. Some days we'd get 30, others we'd get only 1. Eventually, my grandpa had our number changed, but that only quelled the issue for about 2 weeks before the calls began again. The day after my 13th birthday, my mom and grandparents sat me down and said they had to tell me something. They explained that every year on my birthday, I would receive a card in the mail, and it would come with no return address, but as the years went on, the messages inside the birthday cards became increasingly bizarre. By that point, my family felt I was mature enough to know, and that I had a right to read the letters, which they had copied before they were given to police. I won't regale the letters in their entirety, but here are some highlights. The very first letter from my first birthday was just a generic birthday card with a message, "To the most beautiful baby boy in the entire world, love, your real mommy." By the time I was 6, they'd gotten a bit more direct. "My beautiful, perfect baby boy, I miss you and I love you so much, and I'm so angry that they're keeping me away from you. I love you more than life itself, sweetheart. You are mine." I'd opened the letter I'd gotten the day prior on my 13th birthday, another basic birthday card, but by this point the messages were overtly threatening. "Have a wonderful birthday, my beautiful, perfect, amazing baby boy. They will regret keeping us apart. I know you will want to be with me, and I know I need to be with you. We are supposed to be together. I'm your real mother. I love you. I love you way more than the fakes you live with now. They will regret ever stealing you from me." That letter, too, was taken by police, but as per usual, there wasn't much to be done. Around the time I turned 15 is when things got exponentially creepier. Police and emergency services were called to an apartment building in a very undesirable part of town, in relation to a tenant having had a heart attack. After they'd done their duties, a different tenant from another floor of the building asked one of the police officers to check in on an apartment unit at the end of the hall because there were awful smells coming from inside. The tenant said they'd complained to the landlord numerous times, but nothing had been done, as the landlord was largely indifferent to the goings-on of the building. The officer went to the other floor and noted the smell, and knocked on the door of the one-bedroom unit at the end of the hall. The tenant who had brought the smell to the officer's attention said she'd never actually seen anyone going into or coming out of the unit, and therefore didn't know if it was a male or female, a single person or a family, if there were any pets. Deciding the smell was a potential indicator of an issue, the officer forcibly entered the apartment. I remember him telling me that he would have bet his own life he was going to find a dead body in the apartment, but he didn't. Upon entering, he found piles of rotten food and other garbage everywhere. The smell seemed to have come from a number of multiple glasses of spoiled milk and half-eaten plates of eggs, moldy bread, and rotten fruit, as well as any number of other pieces of trash that were strewn about the apartment. But that wasn't nearly the most noteworthy thing about the apartment. What stood out the most was the pictures, the hundreds upon hundreds of pictures that were tacked, taped, and stapled to the wall. I've seen photos taken of the scene, and it truly must have been a sight to behold in person. The pictures, which were from both traditional film as well as Polaroid cameras, covered every wall in the apartment, in every room. Both sides of the cabinet doors, both sides of the closet and bedroom doors, even the ceilings throughout the unit were covered in pictures. The officer cleared the apartment, and once he knew he was alone, he looked around more closely. In the closet of the bedroom, a pile standing nearly to the overhead shelf, as well as piled onto the shelf itself, were notebooks. Notebooks were filled front to back, cover to cover, with what were essentially ramblings about a beautiful baby boy and how he was going to be reunited with the author someday. They were eventually devolved into blatant threats such as, "Everyone who keeps us apart will die, no one will be spared. We will show all of them who don't understand us, and we will make them hurt the way they hurt us." Investigators spent days removing and logging all the photos off the walls and ceiling, and even longer transcribing all the notebooks, which, based on the infrequent labelings of the dates, went back to 1989, June 8th, 1989 specifically, my birthday. While trying to determine the identity of the tenant, they also worked on identifying the subject of the notebooks and pictures. They were able to put the pictures into a rough sequential order and found that the main subject of the pictures had been so since birth. The tenant of the apartment had been taking pictures of me from afar since I was brought home from the hospital. Pictures of me playing with my mom and grandparents, playing at school, my yearbook photos, pictures of me sleeping taken through my bedroom window, and all other manner of secretive photos taken of me at any and all junctures of my life. We were notified, and my mom and grandparents went over the previous incidents that had occurred over the years, but we were still no closer to finding out who the woman was. After the apartment was discovered, years went by, and it wasn't until I was 19 that anything else happened. I was at my girlfriend's house, and we decided to go out for something to eat. Her car was parked in the driveway, and when we went outside, we found that all 4 of her tires had been slashed open. On the passenger side of the car was a message, gouged deeply into the car. "Stay away, he's my baby boy." The police were called, but they didn't really have much to go on. My girlfriend and I weren't very deep into the relationship, and the incident had understandably freaked her out, so for her safety and peace of mind, we decided to break up. Not long after, I received a letter in the mail. "Thank you for getting rid of that nasty girl. You know I'm the only woman you need in your life, and that your real mother knows best. Now all you have to do is get rid of your fake mom and your fake grandma and your fake grandpa. I'm your real family, your real mom, and you're my real baby boy. Nothing will ever change that. I can't wait until you come back to me." It was taken to the police and all that, but of course, nothing was done. The following year, in the middle of the night, our home security system went off. We got up to see what was going on, and the police showed up very soon after. At our back door, they found evidence of someone tampering with the lock, and in our neighbor's backyard, where footsteps had led, a butcher knife. On the side of our house was written "Fakes" in red paint. We decided to move after that incident, and nothing else happened until my 21st birthday. A 6-year-old boy was kidnapped on the morning of June 8th, 2010. Around 11 p.m., reports of a body were called in, an adult female. The location of the body was the backyard of the house we'd moved from about 6 months prior, and was called in by the husband of the couple that had moved in after we left. Along with the body was an envelope with one picture from each year of my life up to that point and a letter. Police concluded that the woman had died by her own hand in the backyard I'd grown up playing in. The missing 6-year-old would never be found. The letter stated, "That ugly little boy doesn't even begin to compare to my beautiful baby. I thought he would be close enough. They wouldn't let me have my baby, and they made me take that one. When they moved, they took my baby away from me for good. I looked, but I couldn't find them. The fakes. They are fakes, and they stole the most beautiful, precious boy the world will ever have. I hope they're happy. They made me take the ugly boy. I give up. This world is a terrible place, keeping a mother from her son, and nobody ever tried to help me get him back. I will see them all in hell." The boy she had taken had honey blonde hair and brown eyes just like me, and the police believed she may have even cut his hair to match a photo of 6-year-old me, as they'd found snippets of the boy's hair on her clothes. The woman herself was a transient with no legitimate work history to speak of, and in the subsequent investigation was found to have had serious drugs in her system at the time of her death. My mom and grandparents, as well as the office workers present during the incident when I was in 2nd grade, were shown photos of the woman and said that there was a chance she was the woman they'd seen in the hospital and school, respectively, decades earlier, accepting that the ravages of time and drug addiction could have altered her appearance considerably. With this, we thought everything had met its end, albeit a gruesome, tragic one. I'm 28 years old now. My mom and grandparents are living happy lives, as am I. I'm married and have a great career. All of this crossed my mind from time to time, but for the most part, I put it behind me. That is, until I received a letter in the mail last week. I tried accepting that this world would never let us be together, that they wanted you to stay with your fake family, and now with your woman. But I know that's not true, baby. You're my beautiful, perfect baby boy, and I know you better than anyone knows you, and I know you need to be with me. I see you every day living your fake life, and I know it's not what you really want. I know your whole life you've been told that those fakes are your family, and that they are who you should love, but they are wrong. I am who you need to love. You are my boy. We will be together, no matter what. I promise. I promise I will never let you go. I love you, and I'll see you soon.
Haha, the ad ruined it. Another one. Hey, you know what's funny? Kitty Dog is also streaming. I think that's funny. Is the dog outside? No, he's not. Alright, I'm gonna ping my Discord again. I don't think anyone's in chat. Alright, I'm gonna ping my... Let me see how good the audio quality is.
I tried accepting that this world would never let us be together, that they wanted you to stay with your fake family, as well as the office workers present during the incident when I was in 2nd grade were shown photos of the woman and said that there was a chance she was the woman they'd seen in the hospital.
So you guys can hear it. I'm glad you can hear it. I want you guys to have good audio quality. Let me... Alright. Hope you guys like the creepypastas. I wish Brady Shuhai had more. I like his voice a lot.
Hey everybody, it's Lavender Town, and I hope you're somewhere cozy and safe because today I'm
Yes,
going
I
to
am.
show you the pictures, the creepypasta. I hope you enjoy it. For a while now, this picture has been floating around on the internet. You've probably seen it by now. The photo is a simple black and white, grainy still of a young girl in the woods. The girl has a dark shadow over her face and is posing in a strange standing position. There has been some debate as to whether she is running, jumping, or simply posing for the camera. The story surrounding the photo has only added to the intrigue. Apparently, this photo was discovered on a trail cam in Cambridge, New York. If you don't know, the trail cams are specialized equipment used by hunters, researchers, and farmers to track game and other wild animals. These cameras are made to snap a picture when a motion sensor picks up movement in the lens's view. The landowners had set up this trail cam for hunting purposes. There are people on the internet who have latched onto the idea that this picture is of a long-dead girl, that this picture is of a ghastly presence. Others yet wonder if this is just a girl and why she might be alone in the woods. Police have gotten involved to find the identity of this child. This afternoon, I saw the picture while screwing around on Facebook during my lunch break at work. When I saw it, I froze. I knew who was in the picture. It was a face I hadn't seen in years. Luckily, I had to call my mom and get the facts straight. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm on my 4th shot of Malibu as I type this out. The booze helps. After all, what else can I do but tell a bunch of scary story junkies what I have to say? No one would ever believe me anyways. Nobody I told believed me. I'm ready again. I'll take it easy on the sauce until I finish. My name is Rebecca, but everyone just calls me Becca these days. I grew up in Coila, a small township within Cambridge, New York. Compared to the hustle of my current home in Manhattan, Coila was a hole. I'm pretty sure more people live in my apartment building than lived in all of Coila. My best friend was Zoe. Zoe was fun, brave, and adventurous. God, I haven't thought about her in years. You could probably say that Zoe was my first love. Of course, at our age, I was too young to see it that way. But isn't that how you always see friends from the past? They are a grainy photograph in your mind's eye, a caricature. You remember all of the good and ignore the bad. I was 12 years old the last day I saw Zoe. Every small town has rumors. Coila was no different. In the late 1980s, the rumor mill was spinning stories about a satanic cult. If you've ever heard a cult story, I'm guessing you have, then these stories were nothing too shocking. Rituals in the woods, animal sacrifices, evil chants overheard in the trees. These were the stories spread from child to child, and unbeknownst to me at the time, the adults as well. Supposedly, a cult had been taken residence in the house in the woods up around Cambridge and Coila, and were privy to these and more depravities. The word on the playground in elementary school was exaggerated to the nth degree. According to my old friend Ricky Davis, these cultists would take children and force you to marry them. After the ceremony was over, they would kill you and use your blood to make cranberry juice, the worst juice of all, according to Ricky. I know this sounds silly, but you have to understand, this is what we thought about these supposed cultists at the time. We were kids in the 80s in a small town. We had no internet. We were much more sheltered to the realities of the world than today's kids. If I had even had a clue as to what was really out there. I'm jumping ahead again. Back to Zoe. I met Zoe about a week before kindergarten. Her family had just moved from Manhattan to settle in a quaint community. The house they had settled on ended up being right across the street from mine. Being the same age, Zoe and I became fast friends. We stayed over with each other, ate dinner at each other's houses, and did virtually everything together. By 1st grade, our parents would joke that they shared a pair of daughters. In the summer of '89, we were both 12. It was the summer between 5th and 6th grade, a big year. We were headed to middle school. This year would be all about lockers and class schedules and puberty. Zoe and I were so close by this point, though, that we weren't too scared. Transition meant change, but we had each other. We were taking 4 of our 7 classes together, and we were excited to see what was in store. The week before school started back up, we were more worried about how to make the best of our last week of freedom than we were about school. Of course, at this time, the cult stories were as big as ever. On the Friday before school was scheduled to start, I woke lying next to Zoe in her bed. She was still fast asleep. I remember watching her sleep and thinking how pretty she was. There was a time when I had wished Zoe were a boy. Part of me wanted to kiss her, and it would have been so much easier if she had just been a boy. Zoe was my best friend. Looking back, I guess it's only natural I felt that way. It was a very confusing time in my life. As I lay there, a clatter came from downstairs. Zoe had a big family, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and a dog. All that in addition to Mom and Dad, and there was seldom much quiet in Zoe's house after 7 a.m. Zoe slowly opened her eyes and looked at me. The morning sunlight from her bedroom window swam through her dark hair. "Creeper," Zoe yawned at me. I scoffed at her. "I was just trying to wake you up with the power of my eyes. Did it work?" She said, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Something like that. "Hey," I said nervously, "about what we talked about yesterday. We don't have to. Nobody will care. And let that little dork Ricky get one over on us? No way, we're doing it." Now a few years older than his cranberry juice-hating self, Ricky had evolved into something of a class clown. He and his core friends would always prank and dare people to do stupid things. He wasn't a bad guy, just a little obnoxious. While we were strolling home from the nearby corner store with quite the candy haul, Ricky saw us riding his bike and made a beeline for us. "Hey, did you guys hear?" he asked us, slightly out of breath from his stressful pedaling. "We found the house." Confused, Zoe asked, "What house?" "The cult house," Ricky exclaimed. "No way, you're full of it," I said. "I did, really. Yesterday morning, my dad and I were out hunting, and we saw this old house out there. It was really huge, but it looked like it was falling apart. My dad said he saw footprints leading out of the house, and that we should leave it alone, but it was totally the cult house." He shouted the last part. Zoe eyed Ricky skeptically. "So you saw some old house, and it's just supposed to be the cult house? I don't buy it." "Think about it," Ricky pressed. "An old house in the woods, lots of footprints. It has to be the cult house. You guys have to go check it out." Ricky seemed thrilled by the concept. I was a little more wary. "You want us to go out to some nasty house in the woods and waste our time making you look stupid when it isn't the house? No thanks." He snickered. "If you girls are scared, just say so." And with that comment, I knew we were going. Zoe was a lot of things. She slacked on homework, she didn't like to do her chores, she had even been known to get mouthy with the teachers from time to time, but nobody called Zoe chicken. Zoe never stepped down from a challenge. "Look," Zoe said, almost angry, "if you want us to go to your stupid house and prove you wrong, then we'll do it. We'll do it tomorrow. We aren't scared." Zoe puffed her chest slightly. I, on the other hand, was less enthused. "I thought we were going to the mall with your sisters tomorrow." "Oh, come on, Becca. We can get ice cream and pretzels anytime. Besides, this moron needs to be taught not to believe everything he thinks he sees." Zoe never bought into the whole cult story. Her dad was a history professor at some nearby college. His personal motto in life was to question everything, which had definitely rubbed off on her. When she heard the cult stories, her dad had told her that many small towns make up stories about things that go bump in the night, but these stories were seldom anything of merit. Zoe saw the stories as nothing more than pure baloney. I was less rational about the cult stories. Looking back, I think if you had asked me directly, I would have said I didn't believe them, but they still freaked me out. I was comfortable not knowing. While I did want to hang out with Zoe, I didn't want to go into those woods looking for a cultic site. "But," I started. Ricky interrupted me. "Hey, if Becca is too scared, I can go there with you." This kind of got to me. I didn't realize why at the time, but I was not okay with Zoe being alone with Ricky in the woods. "I'm not scared. Zoe and I are going out there, and you're going to feel like an idiot once this gets out." Then it was settled. That night I stayed at Zoe's. We were up late into the night looking at the map Ricky had eventually drawn us and planning what we'd need to bring with us into the woods. Mostly a few basic survival items and junk food. It was an unusually cool morning for mid-August, so we bundled up accordingly. The local weatherman forecasted cloudy skies and cool temperatures for the weekend, much to the chagrin of Zoe's parents. After finishing our breakfast, we headed out to the school, just up the road from our houses. According to Ricky's map, the woods behind the school would be the best place to start. At the school, we stopped under the moonlight, to be sure that we had everything we needed. The moonlight was another local curiosity. Next to the school in the parking lot was a huge light post that had been installed years ago. Due to some electrical malfunction I didn't really understand, it glowed brighter than the surrounding lights. Due to its near blinding intensity, it had been dubbed the Moonlight by the locals. As we walked from the moonlight through the open fields separating the brownstone school building from the tree line, I felt uneasy. Aquila is a small place, as I've mentioned. It's normal for people to be out walking dogs, gardening, mowing, etc. There was none of that. Nobody was around. No kids on the playground, no teachers going back and forth from their cars while preparing classrooms. Nothing. I suddenly felt alone. I quickened my pace to make sure I was side by side with Zoe. She made me feel safe. The woods in Koila are much the same as the woods in your own hometown. Lots of fallen trees, worn paths from decades of playing kids, beer and liquor bottles left over from nights of teenage debauchery. Typical. From the map and Ricky's testimonial, we estimated it would take about an hour and a half to get to the house, if it really was there. While I was no means an expert, I had been hunting with my dad and uncle a couple of times. In my 11-year-old mind, I was pretty sure I knew the woods well enough to get us there. While walking towards the house, we talked about what you'd expect a couple of preteen girls to talk about. What movies did we see? What girls did we hope wouldn't be in our classes? How would we rub it in Ricky's face when we proved him wrong? Eventually, our minds started to turn towards the cult stories. Did you hear the rumor that Principal Van Dresden is in the cult? I asked Zoe. Zoe laughed. Yeah, and so is the librarian, and the janitor, Mr. Nick. My dad, too. Really, your dad? I laughed. Who said that? Lisa. She had the nerve to say it to my face. She said the only reason I have a nice house is because my dad is in a cult. Forget her. She's just jealous because her mom is a waitress. Ouch, Bex, that's cold. We both burst into a fit of hysterics. In our minds, if there really was a cult, none of these people would be in it. Every few months, a teacher would give someone a bad grade or a write-up, and within hours, that teacher was suddenly the cult leader. Rumors would spread for a while before a new target was eventually found. This is what really made the cult story so scary. The fact that anyone could be in it. There were always rumors being spread. If stories were to be believed, just about everybody in town was a cultist at one point or another. If a cult really did exist, it was formed by everybody and nobody. About an hour and 40 minutes in, I realized that the forest was subtly changing. Gone were the beaten paths and the abandoned refuse of our elders. I noticed how clean the area was, not just free of trash, but free of the typical forest debris as well. It was as if this area had been picked through numerous times for firewood. Twigs, sticks, leaves, most of these things were just gone. I was about to tell Zoe when, Jesus, he was telling the truth. It took me a moment before I realized what Zoe was talking about. Ahead through a clearing was a structure. Wordlessly, we walked towards it to get a better look. The house was not as large as I had pictured. From Ricky's description, I imagined this huge, sprawling mansion. What we saw, while large, was much more modest than my imagination had led me to believe. The simple 2-story house seemed only slightly larger than my own. The windows that weren't boarded up were long since shattered. The color seemed to have once been a pale blue, but much of the paint seemed to have been chipped away, revealing splintered wood. There was no front door. It looked a lot like the old house from Leave It to Beaver, if that house had been abandoned for decades. In front of the house was a large fire pit. Well, damn, Zoe said. Yep, I responded. Well, he was right. What do we do now? I guess we can go inside and look. It looks like the cultists aren't home, she smirked. Zoe, we came, we saw it, it's really here. Can't we just go? This is really freaky. No way, we came this far. We need to at least find a souvenir to prove we did it. Maybe you're positive nobody is here, but I'm not. I could feel my heart pumping. I couldn't explain why, but I was terrified. Every adult had always told me that the stories of a cult house in the woods were just stories, but here...
Hello, Rayquaza the Oh, I know who you are. Alright, back to creepypasta. Nope, that's... Back to creepypastas.
just stories, but here it was. Part of me was afraid that any moment someone would jump out and grab me or Zoe. Damn it, Bex, I didn't hike through the woods for nothing. If you want to sit out here like a baby, fine, but I'm going in. She turned away and started into the house. As I stood there and watched her walk away, I felt my dread deepen. I was afraid of being alone, but I was more afraid for Zoe. My best friend was going into certain doom, and I couldn't stop her. I wanted to cry. Zoe, please, I shouted. Zoe stopped and turned around to look at me with anger on her face. I felt a tear run down my cheek. I'm really scared, please. I trailed off. Zoe saw the look on my face and sighed. Her face softened. She looked back at the house toward the porch. Sitting on the porch was a smooth black stone. Hey, look at this, she said, as she bent it over to pick it up. Do you know what this is? No. I wiped the tear away. This looks like a pretty good souvenir. Let's get going, Bex. I smiled, relieved, as Zoe walked up to me. She pulled me into a hug and apologized. I felt her warmth against me. It felt good. For a minute, we just stood there. Hey! We quickly let go of each other and turned our heads towards the sound. Faster than I thought possible, Zoe's hand darted down and found my own. She squeezed hard. Just ahead of the house, we heard a heavy trudging through the bush. Through the thin tree line in front of the house stepped a man. He was a large, burly man with large arms. His tattered New York Mets cap hid dark hair. He wore faded, muddy jeans, a red flannel shirt, and a scraggly beard. In his left hand, balanced on his shoulder, was an axe. I felt the color drain from my face. The cultists, they were here. The axe was the last thing I would ever see. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I felt my hand tense in Zoe's. Her pounding heartbeat echoed into my palm. The woodcutter met our gaze and quickly tossed the axe into the dirt. "Oh, no, girls," the man said with his palms flat out. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. I'm just clearing some brush out here, collecting wood, that's all. Really, it's okay." Zoe's grip loosened slightly, then she sighed and let go. "Oh, it's okay. You just scared us. What are you doing out here?" The man laughed. "What am I doing out here? I own the place. I'm fixing it up so I can rent it out to campers. What are you doing out here?" We awkwardly explained why we had come out this far, telling the man about Ricky and the cult house. The man listened patiently, chuckling whenever the cult came up. "Well, little ladies, I can assure you this is not a cult house. I'm a godly man," the man said after listening to our story. "Look," I said, "we're sorry, mister. We didn't mean any harm. We just wanted to see for ourselves. We should probably get going before our parents worry." In my head, I cursed Ricky. He probably met this guy too and sent us out here to mess with us. The man smiled. "You two seem like good girls. Why don't I give you a ride home? It's only a 15-minute drive to town." "No," I said. "That's okay. We know the way." "I'm sure you do. Just tell me one thing," the man said. "Are you girls single?" "What?" Zoe asked, shocked. "You know, single," the man repeated with a little smile on his face. "You aren't married, are you?" I turned away from the man to face Zoe, who looked appalled. Before I could respond, I felt a sharp pain on the back of my head before the world faded to black. I awoke after what must have been hours. It was dark out now. My head ached immensely. I was on the ground, tied up around my wrists and ankles with thick rope. I looked around and realized I was still next to the house. From behind, I could feel the warmth of a massive bonfire. Flipping over, I saw the largest fire I'd ever seen. The tips of the flame were taller than the house before it. On the other side of the fire was Zoe. She too was bound. She was awake and looking at me with a horrified look on her face. I immediately thought back to my backpack I brought with us. Zoe's dad insisted we bring a pocket knife if we were exploring in the woods. "Zoe, it's okay. Where's my pack? There's a..." Zoe cut me off. "Bex." Tears poured down her face. She wasn't looking at me. I turned around. In the dark, I hadn't seen them before, but now they were all I could see. A dozen or so figures stood at the tree line. Each person wore a long black cloak with black gloves. They were all identical, save for one feature. Each wore a nearly identical mask. They were white, expressionless masks. The only thing setting them apart was red. Several of the members in the back wore all white masks. The rest had varying numbers of red dots painted on them. As they grew closer, the cultist mask had more red dots. However, the one standing closest to me, that mask was completely blood red. The robes they wore hid their features well. Some were tall, others short. Some were heavier than others. Several even bore the unmistakable curves of a woman. However, no identities could be discerned from this. The one with the deep red mask stepped forward. He was tall, but not the tallest among them. Even under his billowing robe, he seemed very thin. I started sobbing uncontrollably. Fear took me completely. The leader paid me no mind and spoke out into the darkness of the forest.
"We have brought you 2 new brides,"
he said. The group converged and circled around us in a loose circle.
"We
"We make an offering to you." In unison, they began to chant in an almost sing-song fashion, closing in on us with every repetition. I won't go into the details of everything that happened that night. It's too much to recall. It's too horrible to say out loud. All you need to know is that I eventually passed out, and I only know that because eventually I came to. When I woke, I heard sobbing. My head ached and my throat burned. I looked around to gather my surroundings. The remains of a small campfire lay before me. told me I was his bride. I looked over to see Zoe sobbing into her knees. I had no idea what she meant. I just laid there watching her, confined to my own thoughts. I realized we were no longer in front of the house. The area looked more like one of the campsites littering our woods. It was still dark. Zoe, I started, but I had nothing to say. I realized how cold I was. I slowly stood, completely sore, and walked over to Zoe and put my arms around her. She finally seemed to realize that I was there, held me tight, and cried. To this day, I've never heard or felt such anguish that was in that clearing that night. We must have sat there holding each other for hours before we finally mustered the courage to stand. Upon examining our surroundings, I realized how dark it was, how alone we were. At least I thought we were. At the other side of the dead campfire was one of those robed figures. He was laying with his back rolled against a large sitting log. We cautiously approached the figure. When we inspected him more closely, we saw that the man's ribcage had been torn open. The inside of his chest was completely exposed. His face bore a solid red mask. If I had seen this gruesome sight only hours ago, I would have screamed. I would have cried. But I was not the same girl I had been hours ago. I felt like I was nothing. I became aware that Zoe was holding my hand. I looked at her and she seemed to have regained some of her strength. "Okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I responded. "Let's go home." For about half an hour we walked silently, hand in hand. Eventually I heard Zoe say, "I'm so sorry I dragged you out here, Bex." We stopped and I faced her. I wanted to scream at her that it was her fault. I wanted to scream at her that it wasn't her fault. But I didn't have the energy to say anything. Instead, I just said, "Oh, all right." It was shortly after that, through the brush, that we saw the huge bright light in the sky. "The moonlight." I could hear Zoe smile as she said it.
She's ranked the third
Come
most
on.
effective member of the U.S. House.
Come on. Also, welcome new people of the stream. Sorry that I'm not talking. We are listening to creepypastas. We're gonna start another one soon. If you guys have any suggestions from Lavender Town or any other people that read creepypastas, I can find some. Or just stories in general.
Championing bipartisanship.
Then I heard it. It started as a noise off in the distance, crunching, trampling, pounding. It sounded like some large animal was charging through the forest straight at us. We didn't wait to see it. I looked down and took Zoe's dark hand and started running faster and harder than I ever had. After our ordeal, I didn't think we could run like that anymore. We charged recklessly through the brush, but despite our haste, the stomping behind us grew louder. The pounding was now accompanied by a monstrous roar, a roar which would send a beast of any kind fleeing in terror. The moonlight grew bigger. I could see the edges of the tree line and feel the heat of hot breath against my neck. The rancid air smelled of rotten eggs and fire. I burst forth from the woods like a swimmer out of water, gasping for air. I kept charging forward with every ounce of my strength before collapsing under the gorgeous majesty of the moonlight. The sound had stopped. I just lay there panting. I was cut and bruised from my charge through the brush. I was bleeding. We had experienced the worst and most terrifying night imaginable, but Zoe and I had made it out alive. But my hand was empty. "Zoe?" I asked through panting breaths. "Zoe?" I looked around, but she was nowhere. "Zoe!" I stood feebly. The woods, I thought. I started to walk towards the woods to find Zoe when I saw it. Just inside the tree line was a massive silhouette, easily 15 feet tall. The shadow seemed to be heaving, exhausted from its chase. Right in the spot where its eyes would be were two red gleaming orbs. Suddenly, the entire tree line flashed red, then blue, then red again. I heard a car pull up and screech to a halt behind me. I turned to see a police car. I looked back at the tree line, but the shadow was gone. Zoe and I had been gone for 3 days. In that time, the towns of Coila and Cambridge had been completely upturned. Police from neighboring cities had volunteered to come and help find the two missing girls. After I was found, I was taken immediately to the hospital. I was questioned by the police, my parents, detectives, Zoe's parents, and more police. I told them everything. I did not have the strength to hold back. Ricky, the house, the cultists, waking up next to Zoe, the shadow in the tree line. There were two things that made them believe me about the cultists. First was the examination of my body. There were little sigils carved into my skin all over my body. as well as finding some bizarre toxins in my blood work, some of which they couldn't even identify. Second, a heavily mutilated, robed body was discovered at a campsite in the woods. His identity was never uncovered. They never found Zoe. It was eventually determined by the police that a group of cultists had kidnapped 2 innocent girls. The group then killed their leader, left one girl for dead, and stole away the other. They told me that I never saw Zoe after our assault, and I certainly never saw a beast. It was all made up to cope with the trauma. For a long time, that was the story I believed. It's been almost 30 years, and I haven't talked about Zoe since all those years ago. Sure, the people in my life knew the rough details. I was kidnapped by a cult when I was 12. They left scars on me, both physical and psychological. I haven't told them about Zoe, though. Not my wife, not my therapist, certainly not my kids. Nobody. It's not as though I had forgotten her, it's just too painful. I honestly hadn't thought about her in years. At least, not until I saw that picture of a little girl in a photo from Cambridge. I can only guess what you're thinking now. What chased you 2 through the woods? If you were gone for 3 days, what happened during the lost time? Why would Zoe's childhood self appear in the picture? What if Zoe's spirit is still trapped in the woods waiting for you? What if Zoe is still alive? I wish I could go back and find Zoe's spirit in the woods. There are so many things I would tell her. I would tell her that I didn't blame her, that it wasn't her fault. I would tell her how I really felt about her. I could hug her one more time, but I can't do that. I can't because Zoe is dead. Zoe is gone, and she has been for a long time. That isn't Zoe in the picture. It's me. Me as I was when I was 12 years old in those woods. It's a sign. Seeing that picture made me see the truth. I wasn't meant to escape. They want me back. I hope you guys enjoyed my reading and illustration of The Girl in the Picture, a creepypasta. I'll link the original down in the description, though I have to warn you, the original is a little bit more graphic than the one that I read. I made some edits so that it wouldn't be too much for my channel, so do be careful if you're going to read the original. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and stay safe out there, guys.
Alright, that one's over. And conveniently, I just finished a drawing for someone on Discord, and I just pinged them on Discord. So I'll see what they think of it, I hope. Oh yeah, they like it. I hope you guys like this. I know I keep saying it, but I'm having fun, you know. It's spooky month, so I shall find more. Oh yeah, I gotta make sure my stream is. Let me just double check the stream. Double checky. Let me just double check the stream. Double checky. No, the stream will be re-uploaded with the thumbnail later today. When I'm done drawing the thumbnail, and when I feel like I'm done streaming. I like streaming for very long times. It's nice, and I hope you all like streams like this. Maybe we can do more of this when my parents aren't home and stuff, you know. And where the house is quiet and I can play y'all's creepypastas. And yeah, we all have a fun time. A good, jolly, happy time. I'm trying to think of what I could play next. Y'all got any suggestions? I want to make sure it's something that's spooky month. Spooky month. I have an idea.
$3.50 for a slice and a soda.
Okay.
This is a book I'm reading right now. And sadly, there is no part 2 yet, and that makes me really sad. Because I want to draw pictures to it, but there's only a part 1. Yeah. Well, you guys could just read the book for yourself. It is really good.
So much time together, they sometimes got on each other's nerves. He knew Mom missed him, and felt bad for having to work such long hours. But
Robot voice.
be a full-time at the store in the fall. That'll help a lot, and if I get promoted to deli manager, it'll be another $1.50 an hour. Oswald knew he should. Being in the 4th grade class play knew.
There is a part 2 with someone with a different voice. They saved beautiful girl. Oh no, Count the Waves. Okay. I guess we just keep listening to creepypastas in this spooky mode. No. I'll listen to this audiobook.
The dead possum's still there. Oswald was looking out the passenger window at the gray, furry corpse on the side of the road. Somehow it looked even deader than it had yesterday. Last night's rain hadn't helped. "Nothing looks deader than a dead possum," Oswald's dad said. "Except this town," Oswald mumbled, looking at the boarded-up storefronts and the display windows, which were displaying.
The book is Into the Pit, the book I'm reading right now. Yeah, you're in my school. How do you not know that? It's a good book, and y'all should listen to it. Or read it. Do what you want. Alright, let me play it.
Nothing but dust. "What's that?" Dad said. He was already wearing the stupid red vest they put him in when he worked at the deli counter at the snack space. Oswald wished he'd wait to put it on until after he dropped him at school. "This town," Oswald said louder this time. "This town looks deader than a dead possum." His dad laughed. "Well, I don't guess I can argue with that." 3 years ago, when Oswald was 7, there had actually been stuff to do here. A movie theater, a game and card store, and an ice cream shop with amazing waffle cones. But then the mill had closed. The mill had basically been the reason the town existed. Oswald's dad had lost his job, and so had hundreds of other kids' moms and dads. Lots of families had moved away, including Oswald's best friend Ben and his family. Oswald's family had stayed at home because his mom's job at the hospital was steady and they didn't want to move far away from Grandma. So Dad ended up with a part-time job at the snack space, which paid $5 an hour less than he'd made at the mill. And
1 second, someone knocked at the door. It was a UPS package. I'm just gonna grab it. No, I shouldn't open the door. No, I'm just gonna grab it. I feel like Crocs for my mom. Alright. Back to the FNAF story. If you want to read the book for yourself, leave the stream or mute it and just watch me draw. Unless you guys have any stories that I could play or something. I don't know. Music. Okay. No, I don't want to listen to popsicles right now. No. Wait, there's My Little Pony creepypasta? Who makes those? Why?
Smiled a lot. She would sniffle every once in a while and occasionally
Oh, sorry guys, I'm out of stories. If when I re-upload this video, this live stream onto YouTube, please recommend audio. I know the stuff I could play in the background, like any FNAF readings or just any spooky story readings that don't have so many cuss words. I don't care about blood, I just care about the cuss words, because those, I don't like those on my channel. Goodbye for now. I might live stream Minecraft tonight, or maybe on Friday. Don't know. But, bye guys. I had fun hanging with you. And this should be re-uploaded soon. Goodbye.